For many years, Hollywood created a fantasy world where stars seemed perfect. These celebrities looked flawless on movie screens, in magazines, and on the radio. People admired their beauty, elegance, and charm. But behind the carefully crafted public images, many of these famous stars had some shocking personal habits, especially when it came to hygiene. While fans saw glamour, their co-stars often experienced something very different: bad breath, body odor, and other unpleasant surprises. Let's take a closer look at the real-life hygiene habits of some of Hollywood's most legendary stars. These aren't just small slips. These are serious issues that publicists worked hard to keep secret for decades. Take Clark Gable, for example. He was known as the King of Hollywood, and many people remember his role as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. He had a charming smile and seemed like the ideal gentleman. But by the time he was just 32 years old, Gable had lost nearly all of his natural teeth due to gum disease, known today as periodontitis. This serious infection caused such damage that doctors had to remove almost all of his teeth. He wore dentures, but they were poorly made and uncomfortable. As a result, Gable had terrible breath. So bad, in fact, that it became legendary in the film industry. His co-stars dreaded kissing scenes with him. One actress, Sophia Loren, even asked the director to keep their off-camera interactions to a minimum when they worked together. Gable didn't like using mouthwash or breath mints, believing they would ruin his acting. Some people who worked with him said his breath could be smelled from several feet away, especially toward the end of his career. Another Hollywood icon with dental troubles was Joan Crawford. She was known for her beauty and perfect posture. But behind her polished look was a mouth full of problems. Crawford had several molars removed to make her cheekbones appear more defined, a popular cosmetic trend at the time. Unfortunately, this led to other issues. Her teeth began to spread out, and dentists tried to fix it by filling the gaps and capping the teeth. This caused painful gum infections and swelling in her upper lip, which oddly became one of her signature features. Even though she was obsessed with keeping her home and appearance spotless, her dental hygiene was not as well maintained. People who worked with her, especially makeup artists, said her mouth often needed special care to be camera-ready. Some insiders even claimed that her breath got worse when she drank too much alcohol, which happened more frequently later in her life. Marilyn Monroe, known as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood history, also had a surprising side. While she appeared glamorous and perfectly put together, many people who worked with her said she didn't take hygiene seriously. She rarely bathed, didn't wear underwear, and never used deodorant. Clark Gable, who worked with her on The Misfits, reportedly found her personal habits unpleasant and had no romantic interest in her because of them. Monroe's makeup artist had to keep baby wipes and strong powders handy to keep her looking fresh between scenes. The wardrobe team even made special efforts to manage her lack of cleanliness during filming. Howard Hughes, a famous film producer and aviation tycoon, had a very unusual relationship with hygiene. In his early years, he was well-groomed and considered very attractive. But over time, he developed a serious mental illness, including obsessive-compulsive disorder. This made him terrified of germs. He stopped bathing, let his nails and hair grow wild, and even wore tissue boxes on his feet instead of shoes. He isolated himself in hotel rooms, often sitting naked and surrounded by jars of his own urine. Despite his personal decline, he still demanded that the women he dated look flawless. If a woman had even a small pimple, Hughes wouldn't go near her. This strange double standard, dirty himself but expecting others to be perfect, showed just how different his public image was from reality. Errol Flynn, a famous action star of the 1930s and 1940s, was another actor whose hygiene didn't match his on-screen image. Known for his roles in adventure films like Robin Hood, Flynn was admired for his looks and charm. But in real life, he drank heavily and often neglected basic hygiene. His breath smelled strongly of alcohol, and his body odor was noticeable, especially in the afternoons after drinking all day. He sometimes wore the same clothes for days and even slept in them. Costume designers had to find clever ways to make his clothes appear clean on camera. One of his co-stars, Olivia de Havilland, found polite ways to suggest that he freshen up without embarrassing him. Marlon Brando, one of the most respected actors of all time, was also known for his poor hygiene. As he got older, he gained weight and became less interested in personal cleanliness. People who worked with him said he often refused to bathe or wear deodorant. During the filming of Apocalypse Now, his body odor became a real problem. His decision to ignore grooming habits was part of his rebellion against Hollywood's expectations. Even when he starred in A Streetcar Named Desire, the film that made him a sex symbol, his co-star Vivien Leigh reportedly complained about his body odor. Brando's rejection of Hollywood standards wasn't just about acting, it extended to how he took care of himself, or rather, how he didn't. James Dean, the young star of Rebel Without a Cause, also used poor hygiene as a kind of protest against Hollywood norms. He rarely bathed and often wore the same clothes for days or weeks. Director Nicholas Ray had to talk to him about complaints from the crew. His co-star Natalie would struggle with his smell during their close scenes, though she never said anything publicly. Dean's friends from his early days in New York said that even back then, his small apartment didn't have a bathroom, and his hygiene wasn't a priority. These stories reveal a hidden side of classic Hollywood that fans never saw. While these stars appeared flawless on screen, the reality behind the scenes was often much less glamorous. Bad breath, poor grooming, and strange habits were common among some of the industry's biggest names. The studios worked hard to keep these truths quiet, but over time, the secrets have come out, and they might change how we view these Hollywood legends forever. When James Dean first came to Hollywood, he lived in places that didn't have proper hot water. This made regular bathing very difficult. Even after he became famous and his living conditions improved, he kept many of his old habits, including poor hygiene. These habits seem to have become part of who he was. Director Elia Kazan, who gave Dean his big break in East of Eden, 1955, wrote in his autobiography that Dean seemed to enjoy appearing a bit rough around the edges, and this also applied to how he took care of himself. Kazan had already worked with actors like Marlon Brando, who also disliked Hollywood's obsession with being clean and polished. Still, Kazan had to talk to Dean about his hygiene, especially when they filmed in small, enclosed spaces. Actress Julie Harris, who worked with Dean, remembered that he often wore the same red socks for weeks because he thought they brought him good luck. He also rarely cleaned his leather jacket because he believed the dirt and wear made it more real. These beliefs went beyond just clothing. He resisted bathing in general. It became part of his personality. Judy Garland also faced hygiene struggles, but for different reasons. Her mental health issues, addiction problems, and the pressure of being a child star seriously affected her ability to care for herself. From a young age, MGM Studio gave her pills to keep her awake and others to help her sleep. This led to serious chemical dependency. As a result, she often couldn't manage basic things like bathing or brushing her teeth. Makeup artists who worked with her during The Wizard of Oz, 1939, noticed that her skin already showed signs of damage from the substances she was taking, even though she was only 16. As her addiction worsened in the 1940s, her appearance became harder for MGM to manage. Her weight would change quickly, she looked tired and unkempt on set, and her teeth suffered due to both neglect and medication side effects. During the filming of A Star is Born, 1954, her husband Sid Luft, who was also producing the movie, reportedly assigned someone to make sure Judy bathed and looked presentable. On good days, she took care of herself well. But on bad days, she would show up without bathing for days, with greasy hair and alcohol and cigarette-smelling breath. Her hygiene problems weren't because she didn't care, they were a sign of her deep emotional pain. In her final film, I Could Go On Singing, 1963, her co-star Dirk Bogarde said that some days she looked great and was very professional, but on other days, she appeared deeply troubled, and her hygiene suffered. The film crew had to work fast to make her camera ready without upsetting her. Elvis Presley also had hygiene issues, even though he was extremely famous and careful about some aspects of his appearance. He took great care of his hair, using many products and dyes to keep it styled and jet black. But his dental hygiene got much worse in the 1960s as he became more dependent on prescription drugs. His teeth turned yellow, and his breath became quite bad. Actress Marion Mobley, who kissed Elvis in Girl Happy, 1965, said it wasn't as romantic as people thought because of his breath. It was strange. He cared so much about his hair but barely paid attention to brushing his teeth. As his drug use increased, he often forgot or didn't bother to brush his teeth at all. By the time he filmed Paradise, Hawaiian Style, 1966, his breath was so unpleasant that his co-star Susanna Lee had to find ways to avoid really kissing him during scenes. Even as his appearance changed in the 1970s, he gained weight and became harder to groom. No one confronted him directly. His fame was too powerful. In his final years, as his health declined, Elvis became less concerned about looking good, even though he used to be very image-conscious. By the time he died in 1977, there was a big difference between how fans remembered him and what he really looked like. Elizabeth Taylor, often seen as one of the most glamorous actresses in Hollywood, also had periods where her hygiene wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Especially during hard times in her relationship with Richard Burton, she sometimes stopped bathing regularly. During the filming of Cleopatra, 1963, some members of the Italian film crew noticed that American hygiene standards weren't always what they expected. A makeup artist who worked with Taylor throughout the 1960s said her personal care was closely tied to her emotions. When she was happy, she kept herself very clean. But when she was going through emotional distress, she would go days without bathing and used strong perfume and powder to hide any smell. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz came up with a gentle way to handle the issue. Instead of saying anything directly, he would have an assistant tell Taylor a bath had been prepared in her trailer, so she could freshen up without embarrassment. Her bathing habits weren't laziness, they reflected her emotional ups and downs. Charlie Chaplin, the genius behind the famous Tramp character, also had hygiene issues in real life. His character wore shabby clothes and looked messy, and it seems Chaplin sometimes blurred the line between the character and himself. His second wife, Lita Gray, who married him at 16, later said in court that Chaplin didn't take care of his hygiene well. While some of this might have been part of their bitter divorce, others who worked with him agreed he didn't always bathe regularly, especially when he was busy working. Since Chaplin was such a powerful and unique figure in Hollywood, studio executives couldn't really pressure him to improve his habits. Still, he could clean up nicely when he needed to. At public events, he looked sharp and neat, even if he had been less careful in private. Humphrey Bogart, the tough guy from many film noir classics, had a reputation for terrible breath. This was mostly because of heavy smoking, drinking, and poor dental care. He smoked up to 3 packs of cigarettes a day and drank often. These habits took a toll on his mouth, and his co-stars didn't enjoy romantic scenes with him. His future wife Lauren Bacall didn't seem to mind, but Ingrid Bergman, who starred with him in Casablanca, 1942, reportedly asked the director to reduce the number of close-up shots during their scenes. By the time he filmed The African Queen, 1951, his dental problems were worse, and his co-star Katharine Hepburn later said the set was full of strong smells due to both of their smoking habits. Bogart knew his breath was bad but didn't feel the need to change anything. Rita Hayworth, one of the most beautiful women of classic Hollywood, also struggled with hygiene, but hers were tied to painful beauty treatments forced by the studio. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino, she was told to change her appearance to look more American. One of the changes was to raise her hairline through electrolysis, which damaged her scalp. This caused a chronic skin condition that made her scalp flaky and oily. The red hair she became known for came from harsh chemical dyes, which made her condition worse. Makeup artists had to constantly fix her hair and scalp during filming. Orson Welles, her ex-husband, later said he felt sorry for her because of all the pain and discomfort she endured just to maintain her Hollywood image. Montgomery Clift, a talented and handsome actor, started to struggle with his hygiene after a serious car accident in 1956. The crash badly injured his face and caused him constant pain. Before the accident, Clift took care of himself, but afterward, his health declined, and he became addicted to drugs and alcohol. He stopped bathing regularly and often came to set in the same clothes he had worn for days. Makeup artists had to work extra hard to make him camera-ready, both to hide his facial scars and to deal with his hygiene. Elizabeth Taylor, his close friend, helped him by hiring assistants to make sure he was clean and dressed properly. It showed her loyalty and how much she cared about him even when others might have turned away. Tallulah Bankhead, known for her wild behavior and deep voice, treated hygiene as something unimportant. She partied heavily, drank and used drugs, and openly said she didn't like to bathe during theater runs because it dried out her skin. She didn't care what people thought. Unlike others, she didn't try to hide her habits and even made jokes about them. By the time she starred in Die, My Darling, 1965, her behavior was more unpredictable. Her co-star Stephanie Powers said working with her was a very intense experience. Still, Bankhead's confidence and wild charm were often enough to overshadow her lack of personal care. These hidden sides of famous stars show that even the most glamorous public figures can have very human struggles. Whether caused by mental illness, addiction, trauma, or simply personal rebellion, their hygiene issues remind us that Hollywood's sparkle often hides much more complex and painful realities. Sometimes, what we see on the screen is far from the truth behind the scenes.